The power of stuff, the stuff that stuffs in the corners of our lives. We hold on to it. We can't part with it. Other times we purge it. All of these things. And we buy, as George Carlin pointed out, we buy bigger houses so we can hold more junk, more stuff. But then we start, as we reach the fourth quarter of our lives, thinking, well, I might have to pare down. So how do I pare down the stuff so I fit into a smaller space to do the things I want to do in the last quarter of my life, or the fourth quarter? If you don't know, this is the fourth quarter, and I'm Dawn Gable, and I talk about how we plan for that time in our lives. Some of us call retirement. Others are of no interest in retiring, but it is the last quarter stretch, right? And according to the numbers, 82 is the lifespan right now in the United States. And if you divide that up, you reach that fourth quarter, numbers-wise, at 61.5. And so here I am. We're talking about the fourth quarter, each individual really is responsible for what they want to make of it, whether they even care. But as they move forward and planning and thinking, how do I do the things I want to do? Things will happen one way or the other, unless we in some way are conscious about the decisions we make as we move towards that fourth quarter and get to do things we want to do, the things I want to do, the things you want to do. I coach for a living. I coach nonprofit leadership, but here in this spot, I coach around how to make the most of the life you have, how to make the most of the life you want to have. What is your vision for the future? And today we're talking about stuff and things. Behind me is a bookcase that probably has more things on it than I've had in a bookcase in probably, I know 5 years, but close to 10 years. Because I went through a phase of really purging my house and downsizing the amount of things I had. It was partly emotional and grief process. And then we ended up selling our bigger home and moving to a smaller space. So I had to do the next step. I had already purged a whole bunch of stuff, and I did another set of purge. It's crazy how at least I end up with more things each day, each year. It's just surprising to me. I do like to go thrifting. I do have a personal rule that if I bring something in, I'm supposed to get rid of something. Doesn't always happen. I also have the luxury of I have some Airbnbs, so I decorate them. And so as I tell my daughter, if I didn't have the Airbnbs, my house would be crazy stuffed with things, because the Airbnbs give me an opportunity to offload things and make my home simpler. And I always feel better for it. I really do. I feel internally lifted. I always feel like the house is getting a little lighter with every carload of stuff that I might donate. So we're going to talk about stuff and how it makes us feel. Other people's stuff, our inherited things. Sometimes it is super hard to get rid of those things that we inherit from others, especially. And I know there's a lot of channels around what they call minimalism. I don't like to think of it as minimalism. I think minimalism is a philosophy, and very stark one at that. But I think you can think of it as lightening the load. And what are we carrying through this life? I remember, and I know you do too, when we got to college or just graduated out of college, or we just started our own lives straight from our parents' house, we had nothing, right? Unless unless your parents like gave you all their old furniture, rarely did people have much when they set up household. And I used to haunt the thrifts and the estate sales and look for those things that I could make my home look normal. Like you're supposed to have pictures, right? You're supposed to have, if you have wood floors, you're supposed to have carpet on your floors. You're supposed to have a chair. You might have a pillow and a blanket. You have a standing light like I do over here. Pick up art along the way, family photographs. You got to have some frames to put everything in. You got to have dishes. You got to have this, that, the other thing. Oh my gosh, we're going to have a holiday. I need holiday dishes. I need holiday silverware. So as you march through life, first quarter, especially from 18 to 25, right? You're just collecting all these things so your house, your home feels normal to you. I mean, if you only went with the things that you really needed, you only need a few items really to live. Just look at those hardcore minimalists. You don't need much. Need, N-E-E-D, need much. You might want a home that looks in a certain way. I was a disciple of Martha Stewart. I just loved the homes. I was a young woman at the time that Martha was the craze, and I really enjoyed her documentary. And going back with that documentary and remembering how we just loved, we meaning my girlfriends and my sister particularly, we loved knowing the things that Martha was sharing with us. We wanted that beautiful look that she stylized and specialized in, right? Other people like other looks, but that was the look I wanted. And I know a lot of people wanted it. Obviously, she became a billionaire at one point because we all liked it, right? But that's the collecting phase, right? And then you hit about that 25, and then you get to 30. This is the second quarter, and things happen in life. Some people are lucky that their parents lived a really long time. Some of you may still have your parents and are caregivers even. But my mother passed when I was 30. One grandmother passed when my father was a child. So his aunt, my great aunt, was the caretaker of the family possessions. And she died when I was 26 or 7. And then my other grandmother died when I was 15. And my mother was a caretaker. And then so she died when I was not quite 30. And she was the caretaker of all these family possessions. And so she died unexpectedly and left all of these family possessions to her children to sort through. It was very hard. That was very difficult. It was unexpected. And it was a lot of stuff. But my mother, she was also a collector. She had a collection of salt and pepper shakers. She had a collection of teacups, and she had a collection of silver spoons, and she had a collection of depression glass, and she had a collection of carnival glass, which is a type of depression glass that is very specified. And the kind that she had was the marigold, and on, and cut glass. She had a collection of cut glass. To say that my mother's home was full of things and stuff is an understatement. She had the paperwork from a lifetime of small businesses, none of which made her rich. They just were small businesses. They got her through, but she kept every single piece of paperwork from 1969 on. I don't really know why the delineation was 1969, but it was. And we had to go through all of that. And my mother always said that her picking, her antique habit of picking things up at estate sales and auctions, she loved a good auction, and all of those things, that it was the only asset she had to pay for everything should she leave. She said that repeatedly. She wasn't wrong. almost to the penny, the sale from the items during the auction that we had of her items. And we got to keep, it was a blessing. She did have a will, and the judge was very kind and said, as long as no one argues, we could divvy up things. So even though she died in estate, as they say, we were able to keep heirlooms and then sell. And her bills were paid. Her bills were paid by her antique collection. But we also then chose too many items for me individually. And I know my siblings, of which I'm the middle of 7, also chose probably the same amount I did. I mean, we took turns going literally around your turn, of picking things. And so everybody chose about the same number of items. And I had too much. I had so much that when I did, about 10 years ago, start to purge things, I knew that many of these family heirlooms that were, 150 years old, pre-Civil War, certainly some of them, I had to at least offer up to all my other siblings or nieces and nephews. And the first thing I did was put them all in the glassware and china that I didn't want to keep. I went over and got some beer flats. If you know, they're about 12 by 20, little cardboard about that deep. And I put them on my dining room table. And I put things in each beer flat. And I first asked my daughter if she wanted anything. She kept 1 or 2 items, that was it. And then I took photographs of everything, shared it with siblings. Some of them took items. And then I started asking nieces and nephews. We have a big family, so that worked out great. With anything that was left over, I donated. I donated it and made that step. It was super hard at first. But what was surprising was that I was able to feel the first time something walked out the door with a sibling, and then with the nieces and nephews, and then to a nonprofit place that took items for resale. It felt really good. I knew I didn't have a use for that item. I knew that it was going to either bring joy to someone else or monetary reward at the nonprofit. And the more I did it, the easier it was, and the less likely I was to hang on to things that I really was not connected to. I don't recommend you get rid of something if you're connected to it. If it makes you happy, I love the Marie Kondo thing. Does it bring you joy? Does it make you happy? Then keep it. No one is here to tell you otherwise. I'm not a minimalist, but I'm not a maximalist. And I always think maximalism is a lot like the Victorian parlors. There's a lot of stuff in a Victorian parlor if you Google it up. That's not me either. But having the items that you really do treasure and really do like is the way to feel like things aren't oppressing you. So we've all heard this on the YouTube channels. And what does this really have to do with this fourth quarter? Because we're not here to just let go of physical possessions, like go through your junk drawer, right? That's a good thing to do. And it always makes me feel like I've been productive, is to stand over the junk drawer and purge, and then keep the items and like, oh, really? I do have 2 rolls of packing tape. I didn't even know I had a roll of packing tape, kind of thing. or throw away old markers that are dry. That makes me feel good, actually. I can't stand going and grabbing a marker and try to write on something, and it's no good. So that makes me feel an immediate gratification, right? Going through the junk drawer. But I'm talking about the feeling you get when you're able to let go of something that you might be holding on to because it brings back a memory, and it may even be a harmful memory. And here's a great example. My father attempted to, well, he did go through alcohol rehab, addiction rehab. As part of the process, you have your family time where they do their atonement, and the spouses come in, at least in this program, and the addict atones for bad behavior. And as part of this one, now this was the 70s, they decorated coffee cups and gave it to their spouses. This was a men's group. It was a live-in facility. My mother made an 1.5-hour long trip to go and be with him during this time. And he decorated a coffee mug with the leaves of grass. And it's a prose that my father was an English major and my mother also well-read. The poetry prose is about betrayal. And he was sending a private message to my mother that the addiction therapy group were unaware of. He was sending her a message that he felt betrayed, that she had basically gotten his family to put him into this addiction unit. And she told us this story, at least me and at least one other sister. And that coffee cup, decorated by him, followed her the rest of her life. He would have done this 30 years prior. And when she died at the age of 63, when we were going through her things, there was that damn coffee mug. She had allowed that message of betrayal to remain with her, physically, in her presence. I took that coffee mug out to the trash barrel and threw it as hard as I could into the trash barrel, and it shattered into a zillion little shards because it was Corelle. It was that type of material it'll shatter if you've ever dropped one. And it felt so good. And I wasn't the one that the gift was given to. I so wished she had been there so she could have chucked that coffee mug into the trash barrel and broke it into 1,000 pieces because she had not betrayed him. She had actually helped him. He had been very violent, a very violent alcoholic, well under the influence. And then after his treatment, he said himself he was never violent like that again. I don't know if he was, but that's what he said. He left us not too long after that, married another woman. Best thing he could have done for us. But my mother carried the coffee mug of betrayal with her the rest of her days. What are we carrying around with us that is actually harming us, not giving us joy? There's no way that coffee mug gave my mom joy, right? What are we carrying that does not give us joy? And that was the question I was asking myself when I did the first purge. Am I just carrying this around because somebody told me someone has to do it for the family? Why do I have to carry around all of my relatives' junk, right? If I buy something and put it in my cupboard, and I enjoy it, and someday I pass away, and then my grandchildren say, this was Grandma's. It's beautiful. I'm keeping it. It reminds me of Grandma. But then they get older and they have children, my great-grandchildren, and they say, my mother always had this. She said it was her grandmother's. I am the 4th generation. How can I get rid of this? It was just a piece I picked up at the thrift shop. My grandmother, the things I was carrying around, it could have been just something that was given to her as a wedding gift and she didn't particularly like it. That's why it survived. It had no chips on it, she never used it, and she didn't like the lady who gave it to her. But it did sit on the coffee table nice. And suddenly, I'm the 3rd generation, and my children were going to be the 4th generation to have something that my grandma didn't even like and was given to her just as a wedding gift. And she just kept it. That's what I'm talking about. Carrying the stuff that's just stuff because it was perhaps historic. Just carrying the stuff that perhaps actually harms us, as my mother's coffee mug had to have been harmful on her, the betrayal. There were many great memories of my parents' time together that we did find when we were going through her items. Great photographs before he fell into addiction. Love notes before he fell into addiction. Lovely things that he gifted her before he fell into addiction that weren't tied to this awful memory. But there were other things that were tied to awful memories. So I tried to keep that as a gold standard. Not too long ago, I went through a file cabinet. And in that file cabinet were my divorce papers from my first husband and the custody battle papers with my first husband. And I had no idea they were still a part of my trail of items that I owned. This was in this past year. I put them in the shred pile and took that shredding to the UPS store and paid for it to be shredded. And they said, do you want us to put this in the shred pile, or would you like to? And I said, I would like to put this in the shred pile. And so I hand put the custody papers for a now 31-year-old child and my divorce papers from a divorce that happened 25 years ago into the shred box. And the feeling I got from that, the positivity I got from that, had to have been very near to what my mother would have felt had she had the opportunity to smash that coffee cup. So our stuff is so tied to our emotional baggage and stuff. There's this invisible line to it. And I hope you'll consider going through some of those things and ask yourself, are these things making me happy? Or am I hanging on to something that's dark and oppressive? So that's our question today. Are we hanging on to stuff because it brings us joy? Or are we hanging on to these items because we feel no one else will take care of them, or that we somehow still need to scratch the wound and make sure it still hurts as we go into the 4th quarter?